Okay, so generating ideas. If you don't already have a clear idea of what you want to do, or you just know that you need to do something different, you need to change, add to the current business, or just a way to expand what you're doing, or as we've just seen recently, you thought you had a clear idea, but now, the more information you have, you might change what you want to do. So these are kind of steps you need to go through, to kind of to help you through that process of thinking through your ideas. What resources do you already have on hand? If you don't have the resources you need, like how do you acquire those? And resources, that include both physical things and personal attributes. And, there's some toolkits in the notebook that you can work through as homework to kind of like do a self-assessment of what you have. And who is your target customer? Where do they live? What are the demographics of that your customer base? And again, that is it a want, something they want, like jelly, or is it something you need, like bread? If something you want, you're going to rely on people spending discretionary money, and they will generally pay more money for something they want than they will for something that they actually need. So bread is an essential, and people just generally not as willing to pay for a necessary food product, and won't pay as much as they can for something that's more of something that they want. Like ornamental stuff sells high, but sweet corn not so much. And often essentials are more perishable, so it's a different kind of market, really based more on being able to volume it and make sure that you need to make sure that you have your margins worked into all these things. Things that the non-essentials are generally more self-stable. You can hang on to them for longer, so you don't need to sell them right away. So you can have a higher price margin. So just a lot of. So examining your existing physical resources. These are things that what you already have. And that's a small investment. If you have the buildings, if you have the land, depending on what you're trying to do. If you're looking at resources you already have and what you can do with that, then that's a low-cost investment, and the quality and the attributes of what you already have. You can always get access to the resources you need: land, equipment, buildings. It's going to be a larger investment. You may not necessarily know the quality or the attributes, especially if it's if you're needing to rent or lease more farmland or something like that, buildings, equipment, things you're not familiar with, so a little more uncertainty there. But those are things, those physical resources are certainly things that you can acquire. Existing skills or existing personal skills is a bit different, and it's something that really, you need to really think about what motivates you, what you like to do, and perhaps what you don't like to do. You like working with people, and there's a difference between you get along well with your coworkers or you don't get along with coworkers. You need to know that. But also, if you're in a retail business, do you like working with customers? Because you need to be prepared to always appease the customer. Like, it is true, they're always right. It takes 10 visits to gain a loyal customer and about 2 minutes to lose them forever if you do something wrong. And a happy customer will tell like 1 or 2 other people. A disgruntled one will tell 10 people. So very important, if you're going to be in a business where you're dealing directly with your customers, you need to recognize that they are, they need to be catered to, and you can build a very loyal customer base, and it certainly is how businesses succeed, but it takes constant work. What do you like to do in your operation? Do you like the field work? Do you like working on equipment, not out in the field? You know, like building things? Do you like doing the balance sheets, the office work? Because somebody's going to need to do all of those things. And if, you know, so figure out where your skill set is and where you need, you know, someone else to come in and help do that. Starting new projects is always exciting. You're really revved up and you want to get going. I say it's like, you know, building a greenhouse, you know, laying that out, getting it set up, getting all the stuff in there. That's the exciting part. But then you got to know every year, well, even during the year, there's maintenance. You got to clean it every year. It takes a lot of attention to detail to keep that infrastructure operating as it should. So starting a project is great. After that, you got to realize that, you know, the more mundane part of the process is, you know, keeping it going. And sometimes the mundane part actually prevents us from getting started in a project. But the first thing you need to do is fill out the balance sheet and set up a bookkeeping system and get that all in place. And that's not stuff you like to do. Sometimes it's hard just to get started on the project. So it really takes, you know, you got to focus on what you're trying to achieve and work your way all the way through the entire process. And if these are skills that you don't have and you know you don't have them, you can hire folks who do have them to do the things that perhaps you are not as inclined or want to do. And you know, running any kind of business, farming in general, but any kind of business, you know, it takes planning. You really have to plan ahead, but you also need to be willing to adapt to changes often. I mean, you're kind of making a plan for every hour, every day, every season, every year, and those things, you know, circumstances can come up that change those immediately. Like, say, you know, and literally planning hourly, it gets challenging sometimes. The stuff just always comes up. I myself, I love chaos. I like it when like there's a lot of challenges coming at me because that kind of what keeps me going. I don't happen to do so well with like if everything's just always the same. Then I start thinking about other things and lose focus. So I like the daily challenge. The self-assessment tool, it's in the your documents in the workbook. You just need to go through and look at all those. You have to do a very honest self-assessment, and maybe sometimes having someone with you, good friend, spouse, kind of sitting down with you and helping you work through those steps, so that you sometimes you may not have a clear idea of what you're good at or what you need to work on. And you know, again, assessing your resources. These tools are in the notebook. Just work through them, and I think those are the things that we want to be done by next week if you can. Owning your own ideas. You're talking through your ideas with others, and we just discovered that very briefly in the little breakout rooms that we had. But it's very important. You know, just keep talking about the ideas, because the more you discuss something, the more angles and perspectives that you'll start to come across. You need to look for the information that you need, you know, like when you're looking at trends, you know, what's in the market, you know, what are other people doing already, and try to find people who are doing something similar to what you want to do or exactly what you want to do, but in a different area. The beauty of what we're looking at right now, we're looking at very localized marketing systems, very small scale. So we are not competing statewide necessarily, and certainly not nationwide. So there are people probably doing some of the things you want to try to do. So you can certainly look at as many as you can. I know we have a distillery on the farm, and my son visited many distilleries. And said the most useful part was figure out what he didn't want to do. Like he would go and see what everyone was doing and say, okay, well, let's not do that part of that thing. So learning what you shouldn't be doing is, and what not working for other people is as valuable as trying to find things that, are working. So just learning from failures is a lot cheaper than going through it yourself. And you need to keep, reflecting on your plan as you're going through the plan and building your, what you want to do for your new enterprise. Keep, reassess it as you go along, and then after you start operating, you need to keep reassessing it. You'll almost always find that your cost of production is actually higher than you'd estimated it to be in your plan. So if you can plan for being wrong, you need to build in a bigger margin. There are almost always things in the whole process that they make it a bit more expensive than you had anticipated it to be. But you still gotta do the work.
I had a question. It's about something Marianne said earlier. So I'm not sure if it is pertinent right now, but Marianne mentioned that a lot of the funding comes from hiring employees. Now, if you were to start an LLC or a corporation and employed yourself as an employee, would that be something that would be valid for?
Mm-hmm. That definitely counts to employ yourself. Now, the idea is with local IDAs is to find out what their goals are for their loans and grant, their loans and cost share programs. We're going to go through a case study, and I will allude to our own IDA. Kevin, are you in New York?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm not saying, but I'm more familiar with New York IDAs. There is also one of the resources that we are providing in the notebook is the Guide to Farming in New York, and it's not everybody is going to have a farm product, but the amount of grants available that depending on what you are doing, but if it's a business, you're starting up a Main Street business, there's not a lot of research grants or anything like that, but these IDA loans will forgive so much per employee. So I believe that when you are one person, you are self-employed, of course, but I believe that there is some forgiveness for employing yourself, especially if you are, you're making a new job for yourself. For others who are starting up agricultural businesses like a farm, there are several loans available from FSA, the USDA, Farm Service Agency. They're extremely low interest rates, like 2.5 or lower. They don't forgive loans, but the interest rate is extremely low if you qualify, and you can do the mountain of paperwork, which I do in my sleep many nights for people. There are other sources of loans. You will find that credit and good credit, your credit rating is a resource that you have. It can work for you if it's a positive credit rating. You don't often think about that, but when you're applying even for a cost share loan or something with the IDA, that's like one of the first things they look at. So think about those things as you're mulling over loans and money available. And in our society too, we have investors and angel loans and other kinds of monies that you can find from private sources. So I think you need to consider them too if you can find an investor, or if they love your idea, or they're your neighbor and they want to see you succeed. You know, it can run the gamut with private investors. We have had some farm operations here that have had some private investment from people who wanted to see the land being cultivated. So I hope that answers your question. It was sort of long and roundabout, but.
And there are also, conservation easements and selling development rights. If you have a land base as a resource, that might be a source of, initial revenue as well. But that's a long process. It's gonna take a year to get that whole thing, one of those in place. And the USDA Rural Development, they have value-added grants for farmers, like if you are the farmer doing a value-added product, but those are for marketing, not for equipment and production.
I have a question
Sure.
about the angel investors, other investors. When do you go to the bank versus when do you decide to fundraise? Like do a Kickstarter campaign or start a pitch deck for investors?
Well, in my opinion, you've got to have your solid business plan done, okay? Because these people are looking for a return on investment as well, but their motivations are different. Some of them don't want a lot back, but they just want the satisfaction that they've helped someone. My opinion is I think you should take it to a local bank and just see what they have to say first, because it's an easy thing to do. I think at that point, if you are thinking that your project merits a, or that you could find an angel investor or someone who is also interested in your idea, say you have conservation at the core of your product or service or mission. There are people who and agencies who would be interested in funding something like that. It's just finding them, but you really do have to have this solid plan. And people with money, you've probably seen the reality shows where people are lent $200,000 or $300,000 for different ventures. There is reporting with any of these grants, value-added grants, any of the sources that we've mentioned, NRCS. You've got to stay on top of that paperwork. Investors also want you to report back, how's it going? They want to know if you're reaching your objectives. They might not even be charging you interest or a very low amount of interest. Or they may be thinking that your project is so wonderful that they just want to donate to you instead of Trout Unlimited. So think about it, get the plan done, but you could also, if you're thinking that your plan could be targeted to an investor, find out what their mission is first, and then tailor your plan to what their mission is. I would say the same thing about grants. And here in Extension, we grant write a lot. The first thing that we do is we look at what the mission is of the organization that we're looking to get money from. I can give you a simple example. Some of you were involved a couple years ago in our women's marketing group. So it was the community foundation that we approached, and they had a women's grant empowering women. It was some kind of an empowerment grant. So we were able to have, I don't know, we might have had 5 or 6 classes with local women in marketing a product or service. And so it was really interesting. The room was full of women, and we had a good class. But getting back to the pitch, you've got to sell your idea. And we will be doing some of this and critiquing the ideas in a kind way to help you get to something that could be very successful. So it is a process, like Jim said. You have to be painfully honest with yourself sometimes. I remember doing a business plan for a very nice person who, he just loved cows and he wanted to milk these jerseys and it was his dream. It took us 3 years to get his plan done. He finally gets the cows and he calls me and he says, Mariane, should I be milking 2 times a day or 3 times a day? I said, well, let's get 2 times a day down and then we'll see what happens. He called me a month later and he said, I can't physically do this work. We had overlooked the physical. I mean, I thought, he was fairly young and all that, but he had worked a desk job for many years and he couldn't do the work physically. So from that point, he hired someone to do the other milking. So we were still milking 2 times, but he hadn't built himself up, underestimated the physical demands of milking cows. And I feel like I missed the boat with him. I should have had him lifting weights or something, but he managed. He got through it, and he ended up, getting built up after a while to do the milkings. But think about those physical attributes too. Your own self. How much can you do? Can you stand on your feet to process something for hours on end? Can you physically do it? Can you mentally do it? Those kinds of things. Any other questions about anything? So it's just past 5 after. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about risk management. And Laura's going to lead us through a segment on risk. The funder wanted us to also point out the 5 areas of risk. And you will know a lot more about risk when we get done with this program. But with each class, we're going to talk a little bit about risk management. And so we're going to take a 10-minute break. It's 12 after. We'll come back at it's 11:06. We'll come back at 11:15 or so.